Yeah. Great. So let me pivot a little bit then, from the, government angle to thinking about the role of firms. As you mentioned, JPAL has recently also, uh, uh, become involved in this space and kind of formalized that through the creation of a sector that focuses on firms and firm growth. So tell us a little bit more about that and the work that JPAL South Asia is doing in that regard. And then in particular, I'd love to hear about um, your thoughts on how firms can be involved in what we've been discussing. Basically, making sure that women workers are not only kind of able to enter the workforce, but also then that the environments that they face are actually conducive to their career growth.
Yeah, no, that's again a really good sort of a very central question that we are trying to address through our work. So here I would say that I think one of the issues that obviously is very prevalent in India and some of the other South Asian countries is also this um, occupational segregation. So I think one is the idea that because again of norms, there is a critical mass of women who are preferring to have these workspaces, that are segregated by sex. And then there's the other problem that there are certain specific industries where there's very little representation of women, right? So I think that is where I feel that firms can play a very important role, where they could really, kind of be a lot more active. And again, we have to understand why is that the case, right? So one could be that the norms are such that they only kind of perceived norms and also actual norms that women feel that, okay, no, these are only the kind of works they have to do. But then there could also be the problem that there could be discrimination in hiring, where the firms are themselves preferring male colleagues or male workers. So I think there is a lot that can be done in that space. We don't know what is the right way. We don't know whether gender quotas are the way to go, or whether thinking through one idea is also for firms to really try to actively reach out and do some things to get women to join these type of sectors, and also have better work conditions, have better policies, have more sort of well-being focus. The other thing is, for example, in the US, there's been so much promotion of women in STEM, right? So really thinking about not just from one firm's perspective, but like an industry together coming to do that. So that's one thing I feel definitely we could think. And the second is, I do feel that, organizations such as Shahi Exports have been investing a lot in also thinking through, um, uh, you know, even if it's from the perspective of employee retention, but also thinking about how do they really take women in terms of their own progress ladder within the organization. So trainings and things like that, right? So that's something that is such a good example for other organizations to also think about.
Yeah.
And I think finally, I do feel though that, in the world where we are today, the just giving a voice to some of these things is so important, right? So I do think that who is actually asking these questions, who is carrying this agenda within the firms to say that we need this, we need more women to come, and it is the responsibility of firms to do that. And I'm not saying that that is going to solve all the problems, but that could be a starting point. So I do think that there is a lot of space for such and organizations who have similar types of thinking to come together to try to kind of create a movement around this, is how I would say.
Absolutely, that's right. And what's your feel? We always come up against this problem when we think about firms, because at the end of the day, right, the firm as an organization ultimately cares about its own sustainability and growth, and so everything that the firm is deciding is in some way projects onto that end goal of profit, right? How do we increase our profit? How do we make sure ensure our survival? Um, uh, and so a lot of the work that GBL does is indeed trying to, find cases in which where you empower workers and you give them a voice, or you give them skills, etc. And that ultimately feeds back into profit, because that is the ultimate, kind of metric of success. And ultimately, decision makers within firms are going to support things based on that metric. Um, do you think that there is sufficient evidence out there on the role that women can play in that metric and profit generation within firms, or do you think that there's a gap right now and what needs to be assessed to kind of make that argument more salient?
Yeah, no, I think there's a huge gap. I think that we don't have enough evidence right now to even, like, there is definitely evidence, and in terms of like more macro numbers, we know that, if women were actually participating, then the economy would be better by these many trillion dollars, or so it's a very sort of a higher level organization, sort of statement to
Not
make it.
my firm, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So to make it, I think there the potential of demonstration effect, or just having, if any firm has tried and measure, which is where I think research will play such an important role, right? Because see, on the one hand, with governments, you do need to take to them this RCT and say, look, here is how much your outcome has moved. For firms, it's basically the profit. But along with profit, if you can say that by doing these type of practices, your profit has remained, but you're also seeing this change in whatever outcome they're looking for, right? I think
Right.
that could make a big difference. And that is what we are not doing enough of. So even when we started thinking about a firm strategy in South Asia, we were thinking that should we start doing some outreach from our side to start going and meeting the heads of some of these organizations, etc. Right? But I think, again, having, what is the pathway, right? You can't just go to to an organization and say, here we want to meet yours, because they're also
Right.
pressed for time. I mean, it's like JPAL is known in the development world, but how do you go to the next
Sure.
level? So I think that's why I'm saying that that this is exactly why I think GBL is really positioned to play a very important role of almost a catalyzer
Right.
to hold some of these things. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think, right, to the lack of evidence, um, it is really important to say there, beyond sort of the macro statistics, we've done case studies or, experiments with real firms, and we can see that, when we, sort of specially recruit women for certain positions, et cetera, that doesn't erode profit, or that, that maybe hopefully results in a increase in profit in some cases. That's what we ultimately hope for. But I think that evidence base can definitely be made more robust. So that's great. That's another wonderful area of partnership that we could explore between the two organizations.